You know those conversations that remind you we're all carrying more than we show? Well, welcome back to Underrated to Unstoppable. Today, I am joined by my friend, Alan. He's a leadership coach and author who turned decades of corporate insight and personal healing into a powerful philosophy of leadership through connection, communication, and collaboration. In this episode, Alan and I talk about the hidden patterns that hold leaders back, how trauma can quietly shape our self-worth, and the moment Alan realized he was never broken, just human. It's one of those most honest conversations I've had. I can't wait for you to hear it. Hey,
Hello, Charlene.
how are you?
I'm good. So good to see you. Yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.
we're
Strategic.
always trying to figure out, different things. But
Exactly.
when did your book come out? I don't think I have
March,
a copy.
March the 24th, 2020. It came out right when the
Oh,
pandemic started. In fact, it was tone deaf that week that it came out to even post on LinkedIn because no one was posting anything on LinkedIn that week.
right,
It was just that
right.
weird time. Yeah. But
Yeah. My book came out in 2021,
okay.
and it was still a horrible time to launch a book, right?
Yeah, yeah, it was
If there ever is a good time to launch a book, I don't know.
yeah, it's always I don't know.
Y-
It's also
Yeah.
realizing how much, what the things you learn after the fact. I think for me, one of the things is realizing I wish I had worked on creating more of a network of support
Mhm.
before the launch as opposed to
Right.
since and post. I think I have a much broader network
Mhm.
now than I did then in
Right.
terms of, and just how important that is to kind of get whatever critical mass is out there.
Yeah. I did a
So,
lot of text messages to my friends and things because you want to get those 100 reviews on Amazon.
yeah,
And then I
exactly.
had friends saying, I bought 10 books, I bought 10 books. And so then it was messages saying, no, buy them one at a time.
Yeah,
Because if you
yeah,
buy 10, it
exactly.
doesn't really count. It counts as one
Yeah,
purchase. It
yeah,
was a little
yeah,
nuts.
exactly.
But tell me a
Yeah.
little bit about your book. Since I don't have it, I'll have to get it when we get off the call.
Sure. Yeah. So
Or you could
basically,
send me an autographed copy and then I'll
I
buy one and give to someone else.
there we go. I could do that.
Yeah.
Happy to. Let's get your address.
Mhm.
So the book is really, people sometimes say, like, how long did it take you to write the book? And I say,
Mhm.
"Oh, it's taken me 25 years to write the book." And what I mean by that, it wasn't just me sitting at my desk thinking, like, what do I think about leadership? So my background has really been helping people to develop their leadership skills. And I've been
Okay.
doing that with different industries at every
Mhm.
level for a long time. And what I started discovering, after some time doing this work
Mhm.
is that humans were good at pattern recognition. So what I found was that
Ah.
the best leaders were doing certain things in common, and the bad leaders were doing certain things in common. And
Mhm.
what I started to do, and I'd always wanted to write a book, and I had a couple of false starts in my time. And I had a wonderful mentor, a guy named Bill Bowl, and Bill said, "Hey, can I give you some feedback on writing?" Because Bill was a writer, and he was an
Mhm.
old ad guy, New York ad guy, like chain
Right.
smoker. Like, let me give you some,
Yeah,
let me
so
give you
can
some,
I give
let
you
me,
some
let me give
thoughts?
you some feedback. Come here, Sonny. Come here, Sonny. Let me give you some feedback. And he said, "Hey, you want to write? Writer's right."
Mhm.
That was the feedback. Writer's right. And I
Mhm.
said, "Okay." He said, "Well, he said a book's a big thing. Do you think you could write a blog?" It's like, "Yeah." He's like, "How many words can you write?" It's like, 300 words. "How often can you write them?" I'm like, "Once a week." "Do that." And so that's what I started
Mhm.
with. I started blogging, and basically, because I was out on the road with clients, and
Uh-huh.
somebody would say something interesting, a little nugget, either an anecdote or a story, and I
Mhm.
would use that as the basis for a blog post. And I
Okay.
started in the first year, I was completely inconsistent around my topic, about my schedule.
Right.
Sometimes I published like 3 or 4 things in a day because I was excited, and then I wouldn't publish for a while. And anyway,
Right.
after about a year, I finally started getting consistent.
Uh-huh.
And so I started publishing every Saturday. For whatever reason, it was a Saturday. I
Mhm.
published a new post every Saturday, and then I did not miss a Saturday for over 4 years. I was just
Oh
like,
my
that was my
gosh.
commitment
That's
to
a
myself.
commitment.
I'm going to commit. And so what ended up happening was 4 years later, I have 250 or so blog posts,
Mhm.
and I started reviewing them. And the other thing is, I wasn't publishing these blog posts to get tons of views or go viral.
Right.
I was doing this to strengthen my craft. to be a writer.
Mm-hmm.
Like writers write.
Right.
And over
Mm-hmm.
time, the writing got better. I got to find
Right.
ways to say things simpler and all that. And
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, here we are 4 years later. I take 250 blog posts and I start reading through them, looking for what were the best ones, but also what were the themes that kept showing up. And what I found
Right.
was there were three consistent themes. I had a whole
Mm-hmm.
bunch of articles and blog posts that were all around the importance of human to human connection. So that
Right.
was one theme. The next theme was
Mm-hmm.
human to human communication and how communication is always easier in theory than it is in practice. So there's communication.
Absolutely.
And then the third theme became around collaboration. How do we work together? How do we work in some ways we work better together, in other ways we don't? What gets in the way? And so what ended up happening is connection, communication, and collaboration became my 3C model for
Mm-hmm.
leadership. And that
Oh,
became the
okay.
structural foundation for the book. So the book
Mm-hmm.
is really about how can you, what I call, move from old school commander in chief mindset
Mm-hmm.
of leading, which
Right.
works fine if you're running the Ford Motor Company in the 1920s. You can
Right.
go to town. You can do this fine.
Right.
But in today's world, you're not running the Ford Motor Company. You actually have to do other
Mm-hmm.
things. And so moving from commander in chief to what I call much more of the facilitator in chief. And so,
Right.
and the three meta skills that facilitators in chief need to have. We need to learn
Mm-hmm.
how to, we have to connect with other humans because
Right.
we're first and foremost, we're in the human being business. You
Mm-hmm.
have to be able to communicate in a way that isn't just about me spending information to you. It's about creating
Right.
insight and shared
Mm-hmm.
understanding, in a world that we're drowning in too much information, yet
Right.
starving and thirsting for insight. So how do
Mm-hmm.
we do that? And then how do we create environments that are collaborative where people can
Mm-hmm.
ultimately perform at their best? Certain
Right.
things can do to help enable that, and certain things get in the way. And so the book
Mm-hmm.
is really both kind of conceptually, but then it gets in very practical detail. Like
Mm-hmm.
here are 10 things you can do to become a better connector. Here are the nine things that are going to get in your way. And
Right.
I'm as interested in having people really to identify what are the blind spots and the roadblocks.
Mm-hmm.
Because if leading was easy, more people would be doing it well. And
Right.
by
Well,
my
we would
count,
hope. Right.
on average, about 20 to 23% of leaders do an okay job or better. That's
Mhm.
it, which means that
Yeah.
77 to 80% suck, right?
Yeah.
On a
How,
regular basis.
yeah. So how long did you spend in corporate or did you have a corporate career?
So my career was I worked for an external training company. So this was it
Okay.
was its own company, but
Mm-hmm.
I was a facilitator working for an external training site. You worked in corporate. You might be like, hey, let's
Right.
bring in a leadership training company to go do.
Mm-hmm.
You might have called this company and I would have come in. So I got a chance to work. So I ended up working in and around corporate. I was part of this
Okay.
company. So I had my own experience
Mhm.
of working with a functional or dysfunctional company because all companies
Right.
are. And I also got a chance to get a sense of, oh, like here I am working with some of like the top financial services firms in the
Right.
world. Okay, what's that world like? Okay, today I'm out in Oklahoma, literally going a tour through the dog food factory where they make dog food, and
Ew.
yeah, it's not the dog food factory is not as bad as the wet cat food factory. That's the place you don't want to spend a whole lot of time. That place
Oh,
smells.
yeah. Well, I
Anyway,
can only
but
imagine.
and everything in between, and just
Mhm.
understanding how does business work and like learning about. I remember when I one of our clients was we make carbon black. Like, what's carbon black? It's the stuff they put on the outside of tires to protect tires. I'm like, oh, it's a good thing to know. Like, there's so many things that make this
Right.
world go round that you would never know about otherwise. And
Right.
so just, learning about, pharmaceutical
Mhm.
industry, what's the process of research and developing a new drug and learning about clinical
Right.
trials and phase one and phase two. So I learned a lot about a lot of things because I'm curious and I just ask a bunch of questions. And yet, so interesting. So every company feels like they're so unique, yet the not unique part is the fact that they all
Mhm.
have people and people tend to
Right.
fall into these certain patterns of behavior. So yeah.
So so I had a 33-year career in corporate, and I
Hmm.
would say probably I don't know, 5, 6 years in was probably the first time I heard, our assets wear shoes, right? As companies always say that, is that, our people can decide on every day whether they go up the elevator and, come down and whether they come
Yeah.
back the next day. So
Yeah.
leaders have been, espousing, that people are our greatest asset and all of these things for years and years and years.
Sure.
Yeah, the leadership in many companies still sucked, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what have you, if anything, and I'm sure there are things, but what have you seen change about leadership today versus say 10 years ago? Because in some cases, with the exception of talking about resilience and well-being and that kind of thing, the language is the same.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
it is.
what's changed?
No, I love this question, Charlene. It's really good because I think, in fact, one of the things I oftentimes when I'm working with groups of leaders, I will say, how many of you have said or heard people are our greatest asset?
Right,
Right? And everyone raises their hand. I say, great. I'm glad you think that. I call BS on that statement because
right,
if you're thinking in that way, you are still thinking in an old industrial age mindset. I mean,
right,
think about where does that term human resource, who wants to be called a human resource?
right,
I mean, that came out of the machine age. Like, okay, we've got our machines and our parts and our tools and our people parts, which they were.
right.
They were interchangeable.
Yeah. Well,
So
it
I
was better
say,
than personnel, though.
yeah, personnel, right?
Right.
That was the improvement. But again,
Right.
understand, and the whole first section of the book does a deep
Mhm.
dive into the history of how the mentality of we got here.
Right.
So the original management thinker was this guy, Frederick Winslow Taylor, who was a
Right.
mechanical engineer by training. So he saw the workplace as this engineering problem to be solved. And so
Right.
human beings became human resources. And he, in fact, in his book, which is called Principles
Mhm.
of Scientific Management, he describes what he called the ideal workman. And there's a
Mhm.
man, okay, there's no woman
Right.
in the workman. So this
Mhm.
is, and I'll quote him on this. This is what he says. He says, the ideal workman should be, I'm quoting him now, he said, so stupid and phlegmatic that he more nearly resembles in his mental makeup the ox than any other type.
Right.
End quote.
Well, I'm glad he
Right?
said man then.
Yeah, but again, you look at how this is 1915.
Right.
So we think about the mindset of like it's cattle. And again, how many years are we from legalized slavery in this country at that point? Not to mention unlegalized slavery still going on I mean, you look at
Right.
human rights, like there's so much history of exploiting labor. And
Right.
so going back to when people say, you say people are our greatest asset, I call BS because if you have that mindset, you're still operating from this way. No, people are not your greatest asset. People are your company.
Right.
People are your company.
Mhm.
And you're not doing them a favor by giving them a job. In
Right.
fact, because every single day in a knowledge work economy, people
Mhm.
choose to loan you their talent. And they
Right.
can choose to loan you this much of it or
Mhm.
that much of it. And the question, like a
Right.
lot or a little, how much are you going to get is all dependent on the relationship that you create with them.
Right.
Right. And so that's a mind shift. And the other big shift we have to
Mhm.
realize that we've had in the last 10, 15 years is technology has created this level of increased transparency. So
Yes.
let's say I go to work for your company, Charlene.
Mhm.
Before I show up for my interview, what am I going to do? I'm
You're
going to
gonna
check you
Google
out
me. Right.
online. I'm going to Google you. I'm going to go to Indeed. I'm going to look at other employee reviews and customer
Right.
reviews, and I'm going to get the good and the bad and the ugly, the unvarnished truth about what people think about you.
Right.
Companies didn't have to worry about this 20, 25 years ago, right? And so now there's information symmetry where there used to be
Right.
information asymmetry. And so the value proposition has gone much less from I'm an employer and you have to do what I say
Right.
to this is actually equal. And if you look at for skilled employees, I mean,
Mhm.
I talk with clients, I'm sure you do too, like retention of our top work of any of our workers, let alone our top
Right.
workers, is a huge priority because
Right.
realizing then add into the mix remote work where potentially someone can live anywhere. That
Yeah.
opens up your entire footprint of where you can hire from.
Absolutely.
So it's a different world. It's a different world.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because um, there are these thoughts around how do we get our employees to stay, versus how do we make it so they want to stay,
Yeah.
and then how do we make it so they don't want to leave, which
Yeah.
to me are two different questions.
Totally.
Right. And I find because with my girls who are 29 and 30, and so
Hmm.
my millennial, right, and
Hmm.
very upset when I make a mistake and call her a Gen Z, right?
Yeah.
So my
Right.
millennial is an old soul, so she might as well just be a Gen Xer as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
Yeah.
My Gen Zer is very much a Gen Zer, and so she's getting ready to move. And
Hmm.
she's an accountant, very proud of her. I'm not sure how I gave birth to an accountant, but I think she gets it from her father. But her attitude was, well, I'm going to see if I can take my job with me, right? And she's very good at what she does.
Yeah.
And I said, well, what if you can't take your job with you? She goes, well, I'll just have to find a job then. Right. But
Hmm.
it wasn't a matter of, well, I'm not going to move, you know. And it was really interesting because, I mean, I think I'm older than you, but when we started our careers, we just did whatever we were told to do.
Oh
Right.
yeah, very
We,
much. Comply,
yeah,
comply, comply.
right. Exactly. We were very much believed into the fear, right? Fully.
And I am curious, because like one of the things too, I mean, to me, the utter biggest sign of defeat, like in
Mhm.
my 20s, would have been, oh, I can't hack it. I have to move back home. That would have been
Right.
like
Right.
like, and today it's like, this job sucks. I'm moving back in with my parents until I figure
Yeah.
something better out. It's like, that was not the relationship we had with our parents at that
Right.
generation.
Well, I was going to say our parents wouldn't have let us back in
No,
either,
exactly. Like you figured
right?
out your, it's totally different.
Yeah, it's completely different on both sides. But I was reading an article. It was either the Journal or the New York Times over the weekend that said our kids now, and I think it was talking more about Gen Z, but probably some, whatever the
Hmm.
other generations are, right? You've got Y, you've
Yeah,
got
yeah, yeah, yeah,
blah
yeah.
blah blah. Was saying that they are stunted adults
Oh, I
because
think I saw this article. This is the
did you
article. Like,
see?
this is the guy who's like 38 years old, living in Brooklyn, and has like three
With three
roommates.
three roommates, right, right. And says he doesn't
Yeah,
know that he'll ever get married. And the girl
yeah,
who still lives at home in her childhood bedroom, and she refuses to redecorate from the little dolphin wallpaper or whatever, because that would mean
yeah,
that she's given up and she's gonna stay, right?
yeah, yeah.
But it's just, just the way things have changed are just so interesting,
It
you
is.
know.
It is interesting, and like work has changed, but society. We got to remember, society keeps changing too, and
Right.
also, I think overall, our expectations.
Mhm.
Like I mean, my kids are younger than your kids. My kids are
Mhm.
definitely Gen Z. They're 20 and 17, and I just think,
Mhm.
how many days have they ever spent time being bored? Like really bored?
Right.
Right. And
Right.
so the sense that like that you should be able to be entertained by the touch of a button anywhere, anytime. And
Hmm.
let's face it, like not 100% of my workday is that interesting. There's sometimes I have to go through and deal with invoices or whatever, like
Right.
just dealing with and just how do we, understand that, with these rising expectations, how
Hmm.
many of these expectations are realistic? Like, that your job is not going to be this self-actualizing mecca all the time. And at the same time, the number one reason that people leave is because it's a toxic environment that's
Right.
disrespectful, you know.
Right.
And so the question is, how sensitive are people to disrespect? Because like you said earlier, it's like we just obeyed. And you think about some of the
Right.
behavior that, from 20, 30 years ago that would pass as kind of commanding, today
Hmm.
would be lawsuit.
Right. Right. Even for those who aren't litigious, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's interesting, and I wonder kind of, why do people stay in those toxic environments? Aside from the fact that, of course, we all have food, water needs, and we need the money.
yeah,
And I
yeah.
used to say there was a company that I used to work for where I'd say, it was akin to being a battered wife, right? And I
Mm,
really felt like I had battered wife syndrome because the company would be so horrible. And then right when I said, that's it, I'm just leaving, I'm not going to take it, out of the blue, I get this massive bonus, right? And then you start to say, oh, well, it wasn't that bad. Maybe I was just kind of, being
yeah,
sensitive or this or that. And it really does mirror. So my mother was a battered wife, and it kind of
mm,
mirrored what would happen to her,
yeah,
right? She and
yeah,
my dad would get in a big fight. She would be hurt. She was say she's going to leave, and by the time the bruises heal, and my father would bring her like some roses or something, and then
yeah,
it's this psychological torture, right? Because
yeah,
then
yeah.
you're like, oh, well, it wasn't really that bad. But why do you think people stay? Is it just the food, water needs, or is it fear? Is
No, I
it,
think
I
it's
mean,
a
I'm
lot
sure
of,
it's not one thing, right?
no, I think it's a lot of, I mean, you touched on some really good stuff here. One is that whole intermittent reward reinforcement, how sneaky that thing is. Like out of nowhere, someone suddenly does something like, "Ah, but wait, it can't be better."
Right.
Human psychology is fascinating. So a
Mhm.
couple things like as to why I think people stay in situations. I think, it's you'll take the devil you know over the devil you don't, right? It's that fear of the
Mm,
unknown.
right.
There's that sense of, And a part of that is shifting identity. And particularly in US culture, we're very much, hi, nice to meet you, Charlene. What do you do? It's sense like,
Right.
and how much we define ourselves by our
Hmm.
identities in the workplace. And so, like, how willing am I, to also admit this sucks. I deserve better than this.
Right.
It takes courage to have that,
Hmm.
and then I think on top of that, to go back to something you were talking about before, I'd say, the majority of people are dealing with some baseline level of trauma in their nervous system. If
Hmm.
you look at the adverse childhood experiences score, like
Right.
64% of people score on that thing. I
Right.
do, you do,
Hmm.
right? If you
Hmm.
witnessed abuse in the house, we're
Right.
there.
Hmm.
And I think when you are, we'll call it, your nervous system challenged, call it, whether you want to call it that or you want to look at it as, disorganized attachment. Like when these traumatic things at work come up, it's like, yeah, it's bad, but I've actually experienced bad. It won't be, like I survived that. I can survive this. I think there's like sort of a certain this like tough it out and like,
Yeah.
like, yeah, it's bad, but is it going to be any better anywhere else? This sort of, I
Mhm.
noticed in myself the ability to sort of settle for not ideal circumstances because I think that I'm not going to do any better. I mean, I can
Right.
recognize that in myself. So I
Yeah.
think that that's a piece of it too.
Yeah. And I think, I wonder sometimes, and sometimes I use hyperbolic language because I can,
Sure.
I guess,
Yeah.
but, sometimes I think that I kind of, I called it trailblazing, but
Hmm.
sometimes when I look back on it, I feel like I led a life of self-sabotage
Hmm.
and called it trailblazing, right? And so the way I explain it is, so my whole career were in organizations that were male dominated,
Hmm.
engineering, aerospace and defense, right?
Yeah.
In large infrastructure,
Yeah.
defense technology, all companies that are very much not known for hiring people who look like me, right?
Sure.
So I
Yeah.
was always the only one and always the one who blazed the trail, right?
Yeah.
Because
Hmm.
I wanted to be the one to say, well, hey, if they can have one, if there can be one, then there can be two, there can be more, but somebody
Hmm.
has to be strong enough to fight the good fight, right?
Hmm.
And I
Yeah.
got some weird sense of satisfaction out of that, but in the end, because I had like a major health crisis, I lost. I won
Yeah.
because I had a ton of money,
Yeah.
had being the
Operative
the
word.
operative word. So I don't know. I just sometimes wonder why we do these things to ourselves. And I know like
Yeah.
with my coaching clients, particularly my women clients who come to me and they say, I need help getting to the next level. And
Hmm.
the first question I ask them is, do you want to get to the next level because you want it or because you think you should want it?
Hmm.
Right. And I say, take a week and then come back to me with your
Yeah.
answer, and then we'll know which way to go. Because it
Yeah.
seems like there were a lot of shoulds, but I imagine, I mean, I'm making a gross generalization, but I would think for men, there are a ton of shoulds, right?
Oh, it's a very narrow box. I think
Hmm.
generally, I think for men, in terms of this whole sense of, status and provider. I mean, you've seen the studies about how men are uncomfortable living with a woman who makes more money than them. I mean, there's all sorts of this sense of
Right.
that. Um, and yeah, I think there's lots of shoulds. And I mean, shoulds, and also, you know, we are in a culture that wants to point the finger at the individual. It's like if
Hmm.
you're not measuring up, you're not doing this,
Right.
when we don't necessarily look at some of the bigger systemic things
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
cause this, right? And the fact is, think of all the social cues that we have that wherever you are is not enough. And if
Right.
you want to be enough, you need to like either have a bigger and nicer car
Hmm.
or, sexier abs or whatever, like a better
Right.
dress or a faster phone or whatever. Like just think about it. We're being told all the time that we are living in lack. right?
Right.
And that the only way, and that when you get this thing, you will be happy. And you and I
Mhm.
both know that when you got that thing that you thought was going to
Mhm.
make you happy, that happiness lasted for how long?
Right.
Couple minutes, and then you're like back to like it's still me. That
Yeah.
actually happiness is more of an inside job than an outside job.
Hmm.
But that's kind of the way, particularly, and I lived in Europe. I think you and I talked about this at one point. I lived in Europe for a couple of years and just like
Hmm.
living in the Netherlands with the Dutch people and just like, they have much more of a social safety net in their
Right.
society. So you don't have extreme wealth, but you also don't have
Hmm.
extreme poverty. So
Right.
there's this sense of people are more in this sense, and
Mhm.
you don't have to worry about a major health scare and then that
Right.
potentially bankrupting you. I know you've talked to me about some of your costs of healthcare.
Right.
What if all of those things were off the table? Like how
Right.
much more relaxed would you be if you didn't have to
Mhm.
worry about coming up with my daughter's a high school senior,
Mhm.
and full ride at some of the schools she's looking at. It's $97,000, $98,000 a year now.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? I mean, so
Mhm.
it's like you look at these costs, healthcare, education,
Right.
housing. If these things were more in line with what people could do, you'd be more relaxed too. You might be
Yeah.
thinking, maybe I don't need to strive and fill this hole that can't get filled. Anyway, that's me and my little societal soapbox there on
Yeah,
that
well,
one.
no, I like that soapbox. That's like, I remember reading somewhere or hearing something like how much is enough? Um, Always a little bit more than what you have,
Yeah.
right? And if
Yeah.
that's kind of your mentality, then we're just constantly striving and chasing, and it just gets a little crazy. Not even a little crazy. It gets a
No,
lot.
totally. And I don't know about you, but
Yeah.
sometimes I look back, like when I graduated college, which was in 1990, so coming up on
Hmm.
35 years this year, I left college and I bought a brand new Honda Civic
Hmm.
hatchback that had zero options in it, like didn't have a radio, didn't have air conditioning, zero. I had saved up money. It was $5,500 brand new.
Uh-huh.
And I loaded that car up with all of my possessions fit in that car, my
Mhm.
bike strapped to the back, and that was it. And my entire life fit in that car for a number of years. And I look back to like, and I went off to become an intern at a regional theater as an acting intern, where it was unpaid internship, and I had to like wait tables to like pay my rent. And I look
Right.
back at that time and I think, wow. And I think part of me was really happy. It's like
Right.
you look back at these times, you're like, yeah, like not being strapped down with all of this stuff
The
was
stuff.
kind of freeing, kind of freeing.
Right.
So
And certainly the older you got, you then the saying you can't take it with you becomes that much more real.
where would you put it? Because
Right. Right. Exactly.
yeah,
My
yeah.
kids were giving me a hard time because this was um we've lived in excess for a long time.
Hmm.
We don't completely live in excess anymore because my salary, as my husband likes to remind me, went from like here to here,
Hmm.
very quickly. And my daughters said this Christmas, they're like, Mom, this is the first Christmas you haven't gotten jewelry, you know. And I said, I only have a certain number of fingers and, a couple of ears, and one neck. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah, yeah,
Right?
it's
What
true.
what is the point? And of course, when you're an entrepreneur, you want every dime, you need to keep every dime you make,
Yeah,
especially
exactly,
when you're
exactly.
out there. So I have three big questions for you, but tell me about your business now. Tell me what's up.
Hmm. Okay. So my business now is Hunkins Leadership Group, and
Mhm.
so what I do is I basically work with organizations, mostly some individuals, but mostly organizations and teams, to
Mhm.
help people to become better leaders. And so what
Right.
that's really about, and that can look on different things on different days. So some days it is coming in to give a keynote speech. Some days it might be
Mhm.
doing either one-on-one or group coaching. Some days it might be consulting and developing and designing training workshops and like
Right.
potentially like having a leadership academy for
Mhm.
their high potential leaders who are growing and stuff like that. So that's
Mhm.
pretty much what the work. And so every day is an entrepreneur. So every day is a little different in
Right.
terms of where things are going. But the umbrella is ultimately it's about helping people to become better leaders.
Yeah. And are you finding that more people are interested in that than in the past?
I think, it's interesting. It's all depends on, so I have over the past year, I've spent a lot of time talking with CEOs of
Mhm.
small businesses to mid-sized
Mhm.
businesses, where historically I'd worked pretty much when I first started in this field, I was working for a training company and our clients
Mm.
were Fortune 500 companies. And
Hmm.
what I have found is that small businesses, they understand the need in
Right.
theory, but they're not willing to invest their dollars into it,
Hmm.
right? Because again, going back to that entrepreneur scrappiness mindset,
Right.
it's like, I'll just figure this out and do this myself,
Right.
when they may or may not be able to do it that well.
Yeah.
And so for me, I think it's really trying to help people. I think people understand there's a need. It's whether or
Hmm.
not everyone understands that they're willing to invest actual time, energy, and
Right.
money into making the change. That's a different story.
Hmm. I've noticed with coaching that not clients that I have, but companies that I've talked to have been willing to pay more money to have a male executive coached than a female executive.
Hmm,
So I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but it was really interesting to me. It's kind of something
interesting.
I knew or I thought was the case when I was in corporate, but it was pretty sobering to see it
Wow.
up
That's
front.
Yeah, I'm not surprised, and it makes me sad, like a lot of
Right,
things
right.
around gender parity in the
Yeah,
workplace. It's
yeah,
just we still have a long way to go.
yeah. Well, and women are graduating from college at a larger rate than men are.
Completely, completely.
So,
Yeah.
so that's really interesting. So my first question was tell me about your business. My second
Mhm.
question is, can you do this for me?
Can I do this?
Yeah, yeah. Why are your fingernails so clean?
Why are they so clean?
Yes,
Do they look that clean? I don't
they do.
know.
I noticed it when we were talking earlier.
I guess my fingernails are clean because I wash my hands.
Is that it?
I
Okay,
don't
well,
spend a lot of time in the dirt, and I'm a keyboard jockey. I don't know. It's
okay.
why are they clean? It's just no. I
Yeah,
just
okay.
There
It
we
was just
go.
something I noticed.
There we go.
Yeah,
Clean fingernails.
I just noticed
Well,
strange
there
things.
you go.
That was,
Thanks for noticing.
yeah, you were talking with your hands,
I'll
and I said,
I'll put that on my resume.
I know,
Clean
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 hands,
fingernails.
noticeable,
Thank you.
you know.
Yeah.
Do you know what one of the, you can't say one of the number one, right? Because that doesn't make sense.
No, no. It's different.
But what a big issue is in hospitals,
Washing hands.
it is. It's getting doctors to wash their hands.
Hand washing.
Isn't
Yeah.
that interesting? Now, of course, with JCO, the Joint Commission for in hospitals, they actually and they do actually audit hospitals on that.
Hmm.
So I've done
Yeah.
enough things that I have a lot of useless knowledge that's good just for party chatter when
It's
things come
excellent for
up,
party chatter. Yeah.
you
But
know.
there's the whole, I remember the whole, what's his name? Ignore Semmelweis. Isn't that his name? The guy who kind of figured out that you need to wash hands to keep germs off because the doctors were going from the morgue and then they were doing autopsies and then they were
Mhm.
going next door to deliver babies and they were wondering why all the babies were dying.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really disgusting.
It's how we learned. Learn the
Right.
hard way. So,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah.
but that's one of I at one point in my storied career, I chaired a hospital. I was the chairman of the board of trustees for a fantastic hospital in Virginia. It was
Hmm.
such a great experience, but I remember, being a non-medical professional, some of the things that you just think, why would that be an issue? But you
Yeah.
think about doctors going from one place to the other to the other. So
Oh,
I always
yeah.
notice now when I go to the doctor, if when he walks in, he or she walks
Yeah.
in, if they wash their hands.
Right. Right.
I always notice that. That's just kind of my one thing,
As
right?
you would. Cool.
Hmm.
Cool.
Sorry, I had to have my afternoon
Mm,
coffee
no worries. No
today.
worries.
So, the whole part of this series, the point of this series anyway, is talking about when people figured out, learned, discovered, whatever, some are still on that journey, when they knew that they were enough.
Mm, yeah.
So what was
Yeah.
that for you?
So I'll tell a story about this. It's interesting because
Yeah.
I don't think enough is a static endpoint. It's like there's
Okay.
enough, and then there's layers like onions, like Shrek and the ogre, Shrek. That's a Shrek reference for those that don't know it. Shrek the ogre says, ogres are like onions. They got many layers.
Uh-huh.
Anyway.
Did
So I
Shrek
think
say
there's
that actually?
Shrek says that. Yes, he
Okay.
says that at some point, but he says it with like there are many layers because that's Shrek talking. Um, I'm probably the first of your guests to use a Shrek reference in our
You are, and
conversation.
but I have heard some strange references, so you're
Okay.
not the first one to come with an oddball one.
I think there have been, but I think one of the defining moments of enough for me was, I know the year, it was 1994. So I had read a book. There used to be an author. There was an author named Scott Peck. His most famous
Yeah,
book is called The Road Less Traveled.
yeah, of course I have
Right,
it.
yeah, most people, it
Yeah.
was a bestseller for those that
Mhm.
they're a little younger than us, might not know it. Anyway, but he also wrote a book called The Different Drum, and it was about creating a sense of intentional community. And out of that book, he
Mhm.
created something called the Foundation for Community Encouragement, which put on
Mhm.
these community building workshops, to which in 1994, in June, I went and attended one of these workshops. I actually drove all the way out to Denver, Colorado. And so basically, the premise of the workshop is you're there to learn and not just learn cognitively, but
Mhm.
experience what it's like to be in intentional community with other people.
Mhm. Okay.
And so basically, you're in a room, and let's say there are about 30, 35 people, and there's two
Mhm.
facilitators, and you're sitting in a circle, okay? And you're there for 2 days. And there's only two ground rules in the circle,
Mhm.
with the goal of trying to create community. The two ground rules are, first, you have to speak when you're moved to speak, and
Mhm.
don't speak when you're not moved to speak. That's part of the same rule,
Mhm.
which is kind of comes from the Quaker tradition of that, if you're familiar with that. Speak when you're moved
Mhm.
to speak. And then the second rule is to make I statements. So only speak for yourself.
Oh,
And those
okay.
and those are all the rules. And so for two
Mhm.
days you sit and you wait. And then someone speaks when they're moved to speak and they don't. So I share this all, and there's a structure of community, like process, and it's not linear. And some people are in different places at different times. But basically, you go from what we call pseudo community or nice. Like you think about when people
Mhm.
be like, "Hi, how are you?" Like you're not really
Mhm.
in
The
like there.
surface stuff.
So it's nice, yeah, surface stuff, and then you go through that. Then you get into conflict, and then
Mhm.
from there you get into emptiness, where the stuff gets real, and then you
Mhm.
get into community, like beyond that. And so I share all this because somewhere halfway through the first day, there was a woman next to me who started opening up. Some people had spoken before then. She
Mhm.
started opening up and sharing some very personal, very vulnerable stuff that happened in her life. And no one had ever talked like that to me, in front of me, around me, in my entire life. And
Mhm.
in this moment, as she's sharing, I feel this sense of connection with her. But the thought that honestly went through my head, Charlene, was like, oh my gosh, I'm not the only one who's all fucked up. Pardon my language. But
It's
like
okay. You're allowed to curse.
I had lived this life where like I thought everyone else had like on the surface had their act together. And
Right.
that it was like all of my own like doubts and
Mhm.
like fears and thinking that I wasn't enough. And I
Mhm.
realized, oh, maybe not all of us, but a lot of us feel this way a lot of the time.
Right.
And there was something that was so empowering and normalizing of my own experience to go, oh, thank you. Thank you. Because that, of course, her saying this and sharing in that way made
Mhm.
it safe for me to start to own and acknowledge some of my own stuff around that.
Ah.
So,
Why didn't you think you were enough?
oh, how much time do we have? There's a lot there. No, so why didn't I think I was not? Well, I grew up in a really funky household. I mean, so I was raised by a single mom, and then my grandmother moved in. So my mother and my mother's mother.
Okay.
My mother's from Belgium. She's born in 1935, and
Mhm.
her parents were Polish Jews. So my mother is a child Holocaust survivor. From the time
Oh
she
my
was six
God.
until she was 10, she was taken away from her family, and she was put in hiding with a false name and a false identity, and
Mhm.
moved from place to place to place. So massive trauma. Her mother was also arrested, put in a concentration camp, and then liberated at the end of the war. My
Wow.
grandfather was killed, and so my primary caretakers were two Holocaust survivors with massive amounts of
Wow.
traumatic stress.
Mhm.
So you can imagine between the genetics and the cultural stuff of just
Mhm.
life was not a safe, like the world was not a safe place for them. And they
Right.
put a lot of that lack of safety in and onto me. And
Mhm.
so I would say if there was a pervading mood in my household, it was fear. It's a lot
Mhm.
of fear. And so, and that fear had me, and here I was like a little boy in the 1970s in New York City wanting to
Right.
like go out and do stuff. And it was like, no, no, you can't. And so like there was this kind of internal tension. And so this
Right.
self-critic and self-judgment and doubt
Mhm.
got honed at a very early age, being
Yeah.
able to deal with stuff. So
Yeah, I have well, I guess it's not really a theory, but a belief that if we all think hard enough, we can think of the age that was pivotal. That was a
yeah.
moment that we decided, although I decided makes it sound like it was so
Yeah.
definitive, and it's usually not, that we realized we were not enough,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
hopefully in life we have the opposite moment where we
Yeah.
realize we always were,
Yeah. For sure.
right? So I have taken up more of your time than I said I would. So I'm sorry about that, but I've so enjoyed our
Me
conversation.
too, Charlene. I
Yeah.
actually have to scoot here because I have to take my son to the
Right.
airport.
Of
But
course.
let's follow up and trade emails and
Yes,
and
absolutely.
debrief.
Well, you have my email and now I have
Yeah.
yours too.
Yes.
So there's
Yay.
absolutely no excuse not to be in touch.
Super. Super.
Right.
I love this
Okay.
conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, I do too. So thank you so much. I'll be in touch about all
Yeah.
the details
Yeah.
around this
Good,
too.
good, good.
Okay.
Awesome.
All right. Have a
Thanks.
great trip to the airport.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye.